The blizzard outside our window was nothing compared to the ice in my husband's voice. Thomas stood in the hallway of our sprawling estate, his silhouette framed by the glowing lights of a 14-foot that he hadn't helped decorate. He was a man who moved through life like a force of nature, a self-made billionaire who believed that weakness was a choice and silence was a weapon. "It's Christmas Eve, Evelyn," he said, his voice echoing off the marble floors. "I want the guest wing emptied. I want her books, her clothes, and that ridiculous easel gone. I'm tired of the ghost of her failure haunting this house." My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. "Thomas, Mia is only 19. She made a mistake. Please, it's Christmas." He didn't even look at me. He just grabbed a stack of heavy-duty black trash bags from the pantry. To Thomas, Mia was no longer his daughter. She was a bad investment. 6 months ago, she had disappeared after being accused of stealing from his firm's private accounts. He hadn't waited for an explanation. He had simply told her to leave before he called the police. Since then, his heart had turned into a fortress of bitterness. I followed him up the stairs, my eyes blurring with tears. The guest wing was silent, the air heavy with the scent of unread books and the faint, lingering trail of Mia's jasmine hairspray. Thomas didn't hesitate. He began ripping posters off the walls, his movements jagged and angry. He was a man trying to murder his own grief. Before we witness the moment that changes this family forever, I want to welcome you to Golden Heart Stories. This is a place for those who believe that love is the greatest inheritance of all. We are so glad you've joined us today. Please, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Your presence means the world to us. And if you believe that every child deserves a second chance, please subscribe to our channel and like this video to help us spread this message of hope. Thomas reached the back of the walk-in closet. He kicked aside a pile of shoes and dragged out a worn, blue nylon backpack. It looked pathetic compared to the designer luggage he had gifted her for her birthday. "Look at this," he spat, holding the bag up. "She didn't even take the things I bought her. She took the cheap junk. She wanted to hurt me, Evelyn. She wanted to show me that my life meant nothing to her." He grabbed the bottom of the bag, intended to dump its contents straight into the black plastic maw of the trash bag. But the zipper caught on something. He yanked it with a growl of frustration, and the bag burst open. Time seemed to slow down. It wasn't clothes that fell onto the floor. It wasn't the stolen money Thomas expected to find. A thick manila envelope hit the carpet, sliding toward his feet. It was covered in the official letterhead of a private investigative firm. Along with it fell a small, digital recorder and a stack of bank statements, none of which belonged to Mia. Thomas froze, his breathing, usually so controlled, became shallow. He reached down, his large, calloused hand trembling as he picked up a photograph that had slipped out of the envelope. It was a grainy photo of his business partner, his best friend of 20 years, shaking hands with a man Thomas knew to be a corporate traitor. "What is this?" Thomas whispered, his voice cracking for the first time in a decade. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. "Thomas, look at the date on the letter." The letter was dated 2 days before Mia left. It was addressed to her. As Thomas opened it, his face went from the pale of the snow outside to a ghostly, terrifying white. The man who owned half the city suddenly looked like he couldn't even own the air in his own lungs. The silence in the room was so thick it felt like it was pressing against the walls. Thomas sat on the edge of Mia's bed, the manila envelope resting on his knees like a live explosive. He pulled out the first document. It wasn't a confession of her guilt. It was a map of his own betrayal. His partner, Marcus, the man who had stood as best man at our wedding, the man Thomas had trusted with the keys to his billion-dollar empire, had been systematically siphoning funds for years. But the document showed something even more chilling. Marcus had planned to frame Thomas for corporate fraud. a move that would have seen my husband behind bars by New Year's Day. Thomas's fingers brushed over a handwritten note from a private investigator. It read, "Miss, I've gathered the proof you asked for. Your father's partner is definitely the one behind the missing millions. But if you take this to him now, he'll think you're just trying to deflect blame from your own rebellion. You need the offshore records, and those will take time to get." Thomas let out a sounded choked, broken sob that I had never heard in 20 years of marriage. He realized now why Mia had been acting out. She wasn't being a difficult teenager. She was trying to get close to Marcus's inner circle to find the proof. She had let her father believe the worst of her so she could work in the shadows to save him. The final piece of paper was a bank receipt. Mia hadn't stolen the money Thomas thought was missing. She had used her entire college trust fund, every cent her late mother had left her, to pay off the hackers who had the offshore data Thomas needed to clear his name. She had traded her future for his freedom. Before we see how Thomas reacts to this devastating truth, I want to take a moment to say welcome to Golden Heart Stories. We believe that the most valuable things in life aren't found in a bank account, but in the hearts of those we love. We are so glad you are part of our community. Please, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today. It's a blessing to connect with all of you. If this story is touching your heart, please take a second to hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. It truly helps us bring more stories of justice and love to the world. Thomas looked up at me, his eyes red and raw. She knew Evelyn. She knew Marcus was setting me up. She told me months ago that something was wrong with the accounts. And I called her a child. I told her she didn't understand the business world. I told her to stay out of grown-up affairs. He gripped the digital recorder. His thumb hovered over the play button. When he pressed it, the room was filled with the voice of Marcus, laughing. "Don't worry about Thomas." The recording played. "He's so blinded by his own pride he's practically doing the work for us. He's already kicked the girl out. Once he's in handcuffs, the board will hand the CEO chair to me on a silver platter." The recorder clicked shut. Thomas dropped it as if it had burned him. The moral justice he thought he was enacting by clearing out Mia's room had been a cruel joke. He wasn't the judge, he was the victim who had exiled his only protector. Thomas stood up abruptly, the documents scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. For a moment, his old persona returned, the billionaire who could fix any problem with a phone call and a checkbook. He began pacing the small room, his footsteps heavy and rhythmic. "This can't be the whole story," he muttered, his voice strained and defensive. "If she had this evidence, why didn't she just come to me? Why play these games? She could have sat me down. She could have shown me this months ago instead of disappearing into the night like a thief." I watched him, my heart aching. He was retreating into the logic he used to protect himself. He was trying to find a way to make it her fault again. Because the alternative, the realization that he had destroyed his relationship with his daughter over a lie, was too much for his soul to bear. "Evelyn, think about it," he continued, his gestures becoming more animated. "She's 19. She's impulsive. Maybe she planted this. Maybe she's trying to get back at me for being firm with her. I built a multi-billion-dollar firm. I don't get played by my own partner for 20 years without noticing. Marcus is like a brother to me. This could be a sophisticated fabrication." "Thomas, look at your hands," I said softly, stepping into his path. "You're shaking." "You know Marcus's voice. You know that signature on those bank statements. Don't do this. Don't try to build a wall around the truth just because it hurts." He stopped, his chest heaving. The external pressure of the billionaire image, the man who is never wrong, the man who is always in control, was clashing violently with the father who had just seen his daughter's sacrifice. He wanted to call his lawyers. He wanted to call security. He wanted to do anything except admit that he had been a fool. I'm not going to just accept this based on a backpack found in a closet, he barked, though the conviction was leaking out of his voice. I'm going to call the firm's forensic accountants. I'm going to have every one of these papers verified. If she's lying, and if she's telling the truth, I interrupted. If she's out there in the cold on Christmas Eve with no money, no home, and a father who thinks she's a criminal, all while she was the only one loyal to you. What then, Thomas? He turned away from me, gripping the edge of Mia's desk so hard his knuckles turned white. He was resisting the tidal wave of guilt, trying to hold back the ocean with a feather. He wanted to believe he was a good man, a fair man, but the blue backpack sat on the floor, and zipped in hollow, a silent witness to the daughter he had discarded. He was trapped in a house of his own making, and for the first time in his life, his wealth couldn't buy him a way out of the shame. The weather took a turn for the worse. What had been a picturesque snowfall morphed into a blinding New England blend blizzard. The power flickered once, twice, and then died, plunging our high-tech estate into a primitive darkness. The backup generators groaned to life, but they only powered the essentials. The house felt smaller now, the shadows stretching long and thin across the hallways. Thomas was forced to stay in the room. He couldn't leave for the office, and he couldn't pace the halls. We were tethered to this space by the cold and the dark. I lit a few candles, their amber flames dancing in the reflection of the window. We sat in the silence of Mia's room, the very room he had tried to erase just an hour ago. He sat on the floor, surrounded by the papers he had tried to dismiss. In the low light, he looked less like a titan of industry and more like a broken man lost in the woods. He began to actually read the documents, not with the eye of a skeptic, but with the heart of a father. As we navigate this storm together, I want to ask you a question that really hits home. Have you ever realized too late that you judged someone unfairly? How did you make it right? Share your stories in the comments. We read every single one, and your experiences help our community grow stronger. If you're finding value in this story of truth and transformation, please take a moment to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Golden Heart Stories for more. Thomas picked up a small, leather-bound journal that had been tucked in the side pocket of the bag. He hesitated, then opened it. It wasn't a diary of a rebel. It was a log. Every entry was a date and a description of Marcus's movements. October 14th, he read aloud, his voice trembling. Marcus met with the rival firm at the pier. He thinks I'm distracted by my art projects. Dad was so angry at me today because I missed dinner. He doesn't know I was following Marcus to the city. I'd rather him be mad at me than lose everything he worked for. Thomas closed the book, the forced proximity to her thoughts. Her voice on the page was stripping away his last defenses. He was stuck in the middle of a storm, in the middle of her life, and there was nowhere left to run. Evelyn, he whispered, the candlelight catching the moisture in his eyes. I told her she was a disappointment. The last thing I said to her. I told her she'd never amount to anything because she didn't have my spine. He reached out and touched the old blue fabric of the backpack. He was beginning to see the hidden billionaire within his daughter, not in terms of money, but in the richness of her character. She had a spine of steel, far stronger than his, because she had used it to carry his burdens in secret. We sat there as the wind howled outside. To people in a glass house, waiting for the truth to finish its work. The flicker of the candlelight cast long, haunting shadows across the charcoal sketches pinned to Mia's walls. As Thomas leafed through the final pages of the journal, a folded yellowing newspaper clipping fell out. It was an article from 25 years ago, long before I had met Thomas. Back when he was just a hungry entrepreneur and his first wife, Mia's mother, was still alive. The headline read Local Businesswoman Saves Community Center from Foreclosure. The photo showed a young, vibrant woman with the same defiant spark in her eyes that Mia possessed. Thomas gasped, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. "I didn't know she had this," he whispered, his fingers tracing the image of his late wife. "Her mother, she was the one who taught me that wealth is a tool, not a trophy. When she died, I think I buried that lesson with her. I became so obsessed with protecting the empire that I forgot why we built it." He turned the page and found a series of letters Mia had written but never sent. They were addressed to her mother. "Mom, Dad is changing," one entry began. "He looks at people like they're numbers on a spreadsheet. He looks at me and sees a liability. Marcus is the only one he smiles at now. But I see the way Marcus looks at the safe when Dad's back is turned. I have to do something. Even if he hates me for it. I won't let him lose the legacy you started." The backstory of Mia's rebellion finally came into sharp, agonizing focus. She hadn't been failing her classes because she was lazy. She had been spending her nights at the public library, teaching herself forensic accounting to track Marcus's digital footprint. She hadn't been partying in the city. She had been meeting with whistleblowers who were too terrified to talk to the big boss but felt safe talking to a 19-year-old girl in a hoodie. "Everything I thought was a red flag was actually a shield," Thomas said, his voice hollow. "Every time I scolded her for being late, she was out there protecting me. Every time I cut her allowance to teach her a lesson, she was selling her own belongings to pay for the investigation." The mystery of her disappearance was solved not by a police report, but by the weight of her love. She hadn't run away because she was guilty. She had run away because she knew Marcus was about to move against Thomas. And she needed to be gone so Marcus would stop watching her, allowing her to finish the final step of her plan. Thomas realized that while he had been playing the role of the powerful billionaire, his daughter had been the true architect of their survival. She had operated with a level of moral clarity and strategic brilliance that he hadn't seen in years. He hadn't just lost a daughter. He had discarded the only person who truly understood the value of their family name. The storm outside seemed to soften, the wind dropping to a low, mournful hum. Inside the room, the wall between Thomas and the truth had finally crumbled. He didn't look like a billionaire anymore. He looked like a father. He reached out and took my hand, his grip firm and desperate. "Evelyn, thank you," he said softly, "for not letting me throw this bag away, for staying when I was unbearable." We began to go through the backpack together, no longer as a chore of disposal, but as a journey of discovery. We found small mementos, a pressed flower from the day she graduated, a photo of the three of us from our first Christmas together where she was smiling, really smiling. For a brief window of time, the grief and the anger were replaced by a fragile peace. We laughed through tears at a doodle sheet made of Thomas wearing a crown made of gold bars, a satirical jab at his ego that he now found more affectionate than insulting. There was a sense of healing in the air, a feeling that if we could just find her, we could be a family again. "I feel like I'm finally meeting her for the first time," Thomas admitted it, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. "She's so much more than I gave her credit for. She's her mother's courage and well, I'd like to think she got her stubbornness from me." We sat on the floor of that dark room, surrounded by the remnants of a life he had tried to discard. And for the first time in months, we weren't arguing. We were bonded by a shared purpose. The karma of the situation was beginning to shift. The darkness was being replaced by the light of understanding. It felt as though the worst was behind us, and that come morning, we would simply call her and everything would be fixed. But the universe often demands a higher price for redemption. Just as Thomas reached for his phone to try her number for the 100th time, the house's security system let out a sharp, piercing wail. The backup power surged, and the monitors in the hallway flickered to life. A car had braved the blizzard and was idling at our front gate. It wasn't Mia's beat-up sedan. It was a blacked-out executive SUV. Thomas's face hardened. He recognized that car. It belonged to Marcus. The heavy iron gates of the estate groaned, as they were for Stopen. On the security monitor, the black SUV looked like a predatory shadow against the pristine white snow. Thomas stood up, his face transforming from the vulnerability of a father back into the mask of a titan, but this time, the fire in his eyes was cold and precise. Marcus didn't wait to be invited. He used his emergency key code to enter the front door. His expensive wool coat dusted with snow. He walked into the foyer, his voice booming with a false, practiced warmth. "Thomas, I saw the lights flicker from down the road. I wanted to make sure you and Evelyn were safe. Dreadful night, isn't it?" We stood at the top of the grand staircase. Thomas held the blue backpack in his left hand, his knuckles white. I could feel the vibration of his anger. It was a physical force. "You're out late, Marcus," Thomas said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low frequency, especially for a man who has so much to prepare for in the new year. Marcus chuckled, though the sound didn't reach his eyes. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on the papers clutched in Thomas's hand. The air in the foyer turned brittle. The betrayal wasn't a theory anymore. It was standing in our hallway, smelling of expensive cologne and treachery. "I see you've been doing some cleaning," Marcus said, his tone shifting. His warmth evaporated, replaced by a sharp, corporate coldness. "You always did have a habit of clinging to things that are broken, Thomas. Like that daughter of yours." "Don't you dare speak her name," Thomas hissed. Marcus took a step forward, his shadow looming large on the marble. "Let's not do this, Tom. You've seen the files now. So what? You're a brilliant man. But you're a dinosaur. The board wants growth, not sentiment." I offered Mia a way out. I told her to just keep her mouth shut and I'd make sure she was taken care of. But she was just like you, stubborn, moralistic, and ultimately disposable. The words hit like a physical blow. Thomas's face contorted with a mix of rage and a sickening realization. "You approached her? You tried to buy her off? She thought she was so clever." Marcus sneered, his mask completely gone now. "Following me, taking photos. I let her play her little game because it kept her busy while I moved the assets. And when I was done, I made sure those missing funds pointed right at her. You did the rest for me, Tom. You kicked her out. You did my dirty work." This was the lowest point, the shatter point. Thomas realized that his own pride hadn't just blinded him, it had been the weapon Marcus used to destroy Mia. He had been an accomplice in his daughter's ruin. He looked down at the backpack, and for a moment, he looked utterly defeated. He questioned if he was even worthy of the title father. He had chosen a snake over his own blood, and the weight of that choice felt like it was crushing his very soul. Marcus stood there, smug and confident, believing he held all the cards. He held out his hand. "Give me the bad, Tom. Give me the recorder and the files. We can still make this work. I'll tell the board you had a breakdown. We'll put you in early retirement, and I won't press charges against the girl. It's the only way you save what's left of your name." Thomas looked at the hand, then at the backpack. He was alone with the most important decision of his life. He could choose his legacy, the billionaire name, the company, the status, by handing over the evidence and burying the truth. Or he could choose the truth, even if it meant a scandal that would rock his world. The house was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Thomas looked at me. I saw the question in his eyes. I didn't say a word. I just reached out and touched the worn blue fabric of Mia's bag. Thomas turned back to Marcus. His voice was no longer shaking. It was as steady as the foundation of the buildings he designed. You're right about one thing, Marcus, Thomas said. I have been clinging to things that are broken. I clung to a friendship that was a lie. I clung to a company that I let become my God. But my daughter, she isn't broken. She's the only thing in this life I've ever built that was truly perfect. He didn't hand over the bag. Instead, he pulled his cell phone from his pocket. He didn't call his lawyer. He didn't call the police. He pressed a speed dial number he hadn't used in months. Before we see the final outcome of this choice, I want to ask you, what would you do if you had to choose between your career and your child's honor? Is there ever a price too high for the truth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. This is the moment where karma begins its work, and we want to hear your take on it. If you believe in standing up for what's right, please like this video and share it. The phone rang and rang. Thomas's face was a mask of silent prayer. On the fourth ring, a voice answered. It was faint, tired, and sounded like it was coming from a place far away. "Hello?" Mia, Thomas whispered, and the word was a sob and a song all at once. "Mia, it's Dad. Don't hang up. Please, I found the blue backpack. I found everything." On the other end of the line, there was a long, jagged silence. Marcus moved toward him, his face twisted in a snarl, but Thomas held up a hand, a gesture of such absolute power that the younger man actually recoiled. "I'm so sorry, Mia," Thomas said into the phone, tears finally streaming down his face. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I'm at the house. Marcus is here. And I'm about to do what I should have done the day you were born. I'm going to protect you." Thomas looked Marcus dead in the eye. "I'm not retiring, Marcus. I'm liquidating. I'm calling the feds, and I'm giving them everything in this bag, including your confession on the security tapes from 30 seconds ago. Get out of my house before I have you thrown out." The black SUV sped away, but the silence it left behind was quickly filled by the arrival of a fleet of black sedans, the authorities Thomas had summoned the moment he realized the depth of the betrayal. As Marcus was intercepted at the edge of the estate, Thomas didn't even look out the window. His eyes were fixed on the driveway. A pair of dim yellow headlights appeared through the blowing snow. A battered, rusted sedan groaned up the hill, looking like a toy next to the architectural marvel of the mansion. The car shuddered to a halt, and Mia stepped out. She looked fragile against the storm. Her hands shoved deep into the pockets of a worn peacoat. Thomas didn't just walk to her, he ran into the freezing night without a coat, his white shirt quickly dampened by the snow. He stopped 10 feet away, the billionaire facade completely evaporated. He looked at his daughter, the girl he had called a disappointment, and he realized she was the only truly substantial thing he had ever created. "I found it," Thomas whispered, his voice cracking. He held up the blue backpack like it was a holy relic. "I found the truth, Mia. I know what you did. I know what you gave up." Mia's eyes filled with tears that didn't fall. She looked at the house, then back at her father. "I didn't want the money, Dad. I just wanted you to be the man Mom remembered. The one who cared about people more than profits." Thomas took the final steps toward her and pulled her into a crushing embrace. "That man is back," he promised into her hair, "because of you." But the justice didn't end in the driveway. Thomas led Mia into his private study, where he sat her down in the large leather chair, the seat of his power. He opened his laptop and, with Mia watching, he sent an all-staff memo to the thousands of employees in his firm. In the email, he didn't just announce Marcus's termination. He attached the forensic evidence Mia had gathered. He publicly apologized to his daughter, naming her the primary reason the company still existed. By the time the sun rose, Mia wasn't just the runaway stepdaughter anymore. She was the celebrated savior of a global empire. As we conclude this journey of redemption, we at Golden Heart Stories want to thank you for staying with us until the very end. This story reminds us that while pride can build walls, only the truth can build a home. If you believe that a father's love is the greatest wealth of all, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. It helps us continue to share these messages of hope and justice. Tell us in the comments, what would you say to someone you need to apologize to this Christmas? The morning light finally broke, hitting the ice-covered trees and turning the entire estate into a palace of crystal. Inside, the three of us sat by the fire. Thomas reached into the blue backpack and pulled out an old, crumpled drawing Mia had made when she was 7. It was a picture of a house with a huge heart on the roof. "I'm stepping down, Mia," Thomas said softly, his hand resting on hers. "I'm going to spend my time making sure this house finally looks like your drawing. We're starting a foundation in your mother's name, and I want you to lead it." The moral justice was complete. The man who valued money had learned the value of a soul, and the girl who was cast out was now the one holding the keys to the future. It was a Christmas miracle born not of luck, but of a daughter's unwavering heart.